My name is Nate Mickle. You're listening to Mickles and Dimes Layer 2, where every interview is dedicated to the simple, the practical, and the underappreciated. Bryan Porter is launching an AI company after serving as portfolio manager at the hedge fund MIG Capital. Earlier in his career, he worked at the Carlyle Group and Goldman Sachs and earned his MBA from Stanford. But before all of that, Bryan was working at McDonald's and sleeping on couches, in closets, and in cars. In episode 138 of this podcast, Bryan shares the incredible, inspirational story of how he pulled himself out of his tailspin. And in that episode, we touched briefly on how Bryan became obsessed with health and fitness. In today's episode, we take a deep dive into health and fitness. One reason for Bryan's outlier success is his outlier ability to learn and apply. Over the past 3 decades, he's studied and implemented the best science of health and fitness in his own life, and today he shares those insights. While this podcast shouldn't be relied on for medical advice, I find Bryan's approach both fascinating and inspiring. I'll be listening to this episode over and again, and it will also be required listening for my kids. And if you're like me and want to keep learning from Bryan Porter, check out his website, bryan-porter.com. And Bryan is spelled B-R-Y-A-N. And now, I hope you all enjoy learning from Bryan Porter today. All right, Bryan, welcome back. You are one of the few repeat guests. Episode 138 was our first interview, and it was amazing for several reasons. One, hearing the story of your life was incredible, unbelievable. So for listeners, if you want to hear a crazy, interesting, inspirational story, go check out episode 138. Another reason I think was amazing is because you've achieved outlier success and you provided a roadmap for how to do that. Now, much of the interview was focused on how you progressed in kind of the finance, banking, investment banking, private equity world and into a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund. But the general roadmap is there for anybody to apply regardless of their field. And when it comes to outlier success, you're not the type of person to do things at kind of half effort. And so when it comes to health, physical fitness, diet, sleep, you're pretty dialed in. Now, in episode 138, we touched on health just a little bit, but we thought it would be fun to do a bit more of a deep dive on health, talk about the things you've been researching and applying. Now, you're not a doctor, but you are a biohacker, or if that has maybe a negative connotation, certainly a health enthusiast. You try to learn and apply the best science on health. You've been doing this for multiple decades. So with that, welcome back to the show. And maybe you could provide kind of a brief overview of the things we'll be talking about today, and then we can jump in.
Thanks, Nate. Yeah, I'm not a doctor. This is not medical advice, so ask your doctor before doing this. I think there's a few things that we'll just start with the minimums. Sleep is the fastest way to feel better and get more mental clarity. Try to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep. If you're getting less than 6, you're reducing the quality and the quantity of your life. Exercise 6 days a week, minimum 45 minutes brisk walk. You can break up sitting with 10 body squats every 45 minutes. Nobody's too busy for that. Strength 2 times per week as a min, and try to get to max heart rate once a week. It's really helpful to have an event on the calendar that you're working towards to keep you motivated. Eating well, big focus is on a gram of protein per pound of body weight. My kids are sick of hearing eat more protein, but it's important. Eat lots of fiber, healthy fats, olive oil, avocado, and fish, and good, clean, filtered water with electrolytes. One really helpful thing is if you eat protein and fiber with a meal, you'll reduce your blood sugar area under the curve after a meal by about 20 to 30%. And if you take a 30-minute walk after that meal, you reduce that area by about a third. So combined, that takes down the blood sugar spike by about a half. And we'll talk about why that's important, but it's very important. And then there's the emotional piece. It's all linked. It's out of scope for today, but our emotional well-being has a central role in our health. Gabor Mate says the body keeps the score. Trauma is stored in our nervous system and in hormone regulation and in our immune system. So that's, I think, the very basics, but I think we'll go into a lot more depth on each of these. But before we do, I just want to say, this is my best thinking. Please do your own work. We're always learning. I'm always learning. And some of the stuff will change. Peter Tia used to talk about intermittent fasting. But then he did DEXA scans and showed that he was losing too much muscle. He was paleo, but his trigs were out of control. And he took metformin, but found out through lactate testing that he was getting metabolic dysfunction. So please always continue to learn. And you've got to take ownership for yourself. Your doctor cares about you, but can only see you for 15 minutes. And their hands are tied by the insurance that won't pay for prevention. And a lot of people go online to learn things, but influencers will say things to get attention. And sometimes those are dangerous. And, they're trying to sell you things. Lab test ranges are helpful, but they're based on population averages. So your reading could be within a normal range, but if you're up towards the edge, that range is anchored to an unhealthy population. And we know that 74% of the population is either obese or overweight. So you really have to take ownership for your own health. Some of the things I'm going to say might sound crazy, just like if I were to explain rockets or cell phones 100 years ago. It's science, and some of it's going to be weird. And I think some of the things may be hard to hear because I think everyone has something that they could be doing different. But know this, you are not your stats. You're not how much you can squat or how fast you can run or what the scale says when you step on it. So give yourself a lot of love, and to those around you. Life is hard and decisions are motivated by so many complex things. I'm certainly not here to judge you, just to share some things that I've learned. And if none of this resonates with you, it's all good. I uplift your choices. Just know that they are your choices and you have the power in you. No matter what your journey is that got you here, the best way forward is to let go of the past. And there's nothing we can do about that. Just accept it and do what you can now. But the greatest predictor of becoming a professional athlete is that your parents were professional athletes. So winning the genetic lottery is not very impressive to me. What is impressive is someone deciding every day to go do the work, no matter if they're chasing the podium or chasing cutoff times. So whatever your starting point is, you're beautiful inside and out and worthy of love. So appreciate you bearing with me with that.
That was a lot. Lucky for us, we get to dig into all of that. Just a few quick reactions. I just remember back in the day, like low sleep, not sleeping much was a badge of honor. And I feel like I've certainly changed my view on that. And I think much of society has as well. When it comes to exercise, I've been surprised at how much the calendar item helps. Seeing it every day in the calendar. I've been trying to exercise for years, and it was just part of my routine. But then I put it on the calendar, and again, I've been surprised at how much just seeing it on the calendar helps. Food, I'm looking forward to this because this is something that I'm still especially trying to figure out and I've had the least kind of education on. Your point on population averages is really interesting, weighted to a really unhealthy population. So just because we're in the normal range doesn't necessarily mean it certainly doesn't mean it's optimal range for us. And two other things I was thinking, there comes a point, or I've had multiple points in my life where it's like, I've got to figure this out myself. I do have to take ownership. Because if I just keep doing what my body tells me or what my circumstances dictate, my health gets out of control. And so this is something I just wanted to emphasize your point of we do need to take ownership for this if we want to stay healthy. And then the last thing I'll share before we really jump in is something Brad Stolberg shared on this podcast. It said, fierce self-discipline also requires fierce self-compassion. And I like that. If we try to hold ourselves to the highest possible standard, that can be good, but we're going to mess up. And so we do have to be forgiving of ourselves. So anyway, I really like that phrase, and I appreciate your rant. We're not our stats. Genetics do matter. I had not heard that stat about the professional athletes, but the second you say it, it's like, of course, LeBron James's child has an infinitely higher probability of being a professional athlete than I do at 5'8", right? So great stuff. So much there. So with that, let's get going. Let's jump in. Take it away. Where do you want to go?
Yeah. I think one thing as a follow-up to that point on the calendar, that we do have this thing that we call decision fatigue. So if you have to constantly debate yourself every time you want to go work out, that's going to wear you down. So yeah, having a pre-decision, I think, is a lot stronger foundation. So let's go to exercise. I think that's probably the most interesting to talk about. So there's this OG coach called Joel Friel. He says you can only be excellent in three things. And so I think the typical prioritization that people would take is family, work, and then you kind of have one floating that you can decide what to do. And you can decide to focus that and do something really great, or maybe just do lots of things. But I would just say pick that thing wisely. So for me, that third thing is exercise. There's a coach called Alan Cousins. He has this framework. He's got data on a bunch of athletes, and he's come up with this kind of outline that says to be healthy, you've got to do 500 calories a day of work. And you keep adding 500 calories to go get fit, another 500, so you're at 1,500 to be very fit. And if you want to be very fast, you got to go 2,500 calories. I think initially it doesn't matter what you do, and it doesn't matter how long it takes, just get it done. But I think spending time in those first two buckets of 500 calories a day to be healthy, 1,000 calories a day to be fit is a good kind of starting point.
Now, this isn't okay because we're in the exercise section. This isn't obviously the diet section. So we're talking burning. We got to burn to be healthy. We got to work 500 calories a day to be healthy, 1,000 to be fit, and then it keeps going up from there.
Yep. Yeah. So the elite people are burning 2,500 calories a day.
I also really love this framework of you've only got time to be excellent in three things. And it reminds me of something my very first football coach said, is you've got your football life, your academic life, and your social life, and you've only got time for two, choose wisely. And now not all coaches would necessarily put it that harshly. And Bronco Mendenhall talks about the power of let's be good at football and social and academics would be his approach. But to Joel's point, there's only so much time in a day. Every decision we make is a decision we can't make. Every decision comes with an opportunity cost. And to me, that seems right. Like, okay, you've got your work to pay the bills. You've got your family, your relationships where people get their most meaning. And you've got a hobby. What is that hobby going to be? And if it doesn't include some sort of take care of your body, then your body is going to pay the price, which in turn is going to hurt the other aspects of your life, your family and your work.
Yeah. And I think if you want to be great at it, you're going to have to dedicate 10 to 15 hours a week at it. And where does that come from?
Yeah, that's a good point too. In sports, we know, just from my background, we know that if you want to be a good free throw shooter, you got to shoot a lot of shots. If you want to be a good quarterback, you got to throw a lot of balls. If you want to be in good shape, if you want to be healthy, you got to spend the time. So yeah, great insight.
Yeah. And then you can decide what that modality looks like. There's lots of different ways to get that work done. I like to introduce this concept of a hybrid athlete. The problem with someone who just focuses on endurance all the time and doesn't do strength, eventually they whittle away. Someone that only focuses on strength all the time, but not cardio, they're going to be slow and they can't sustain work for a long time. So, the hybrid athlete is both strong and fast, has cardiovascular and muscular endurance, and you can drop them into anywhere and they perform well. They can do a lot of work. They can run really fast. They can take a hill with a big pack. They can take a shovel and move a bunch of dirt, and then they recover quickly. They can endure pain and discomfort and fatigue. So I think this hybrid athlete concept is they're quite resilient, and another way, they're hard to kill. So that's kind of the concept I like to think about is how do I make myself hard to kill?
That's great. The hybrid athlete framework. You see this on social media or in public discourse, like it's all about the cardio or it's all about the strength training. And to me, this seems pretty clearly like, no, it's about both. Because as you said, run forever, you whittle away, live forever, and only do that, you're going to break something. And what better framework to think about than how can I make myself hard to kill? Because ultimately that's what we want to do. Do we have a stronger drive? Is there a stronger drive known to our species than stay alive? But related to that is, of course, how can I make myself hard to kill? I've never thought of it quite like that, but I love it. Okay, how do we do it?
All right. So as a foundation for strength, you got to work out twice a week. I think ideally you're going to go 3+ times per week, but don't not work out if you can't get to 3, right? And if you're going to do 2, then make it count. Everyone's heard the stats. You lose about 1% or 2% of your muscle per year in your 30s to your 50s. You lose 3% of your muscle from your 50s to your 70s. But I think more concerning is power declines twice that rate. And you're just fighting this curve that just has this slow atrophy. So you really have to push back hard against that. It's especially important for women because loading the muscles will actually increase bone density. Bone density is modulated by the load that you put on it and also energy availability, which we'll talk about later. So what's happening when you're working out? I think what's cool about strength, cardio fitness takes a very long time to build. You build that very slowly over a very long period of time. You start working out in the gym, you're going to see results very quickly. Your muscles start pumping. In 6 to 8 weeks, you'll start to build muscle and you'll see it. So it's a cool feeling. You'll feel stronger. In fact, even when you go to the gym, you feel stronger from set to set. I don't know if you've had that experience, but when you come back to a machine, you got to wait all through that cycle. Part of that is your brain is just learning to recruit more muscle fibers more efficiently. So there's actually a strong nervous system impact that's happening. And after the first month or so, you're going to have hypertrophy, muscle building, and metabolic benefits.
So talking about how we just lose muscle over time, that reminds me of something I think Peter Attia said, but if he didn't, somebody said it and I thought it was interesting. And I think it's true. I know this statement is true. Age is the greatest predictor of death.
Right.
The older you get, the more likely you are to die. And the thing that stuck out to me was they said, basically, you take the unhealthiest 30-year-old and you compare them to the healthiest 80-year-old, assuming the 30-year-old doesn't have some acute thing that they're going to die from tomorrow. But just like a really unhealthy 30-year-old, the healthiest 70, 80-year-old, who's going to die sooner? The healthiest 80-year-old in the world. At least that's what statistics would say, right? Because age is the most important predictor of death. And then the other thing that I love about strength training, like you said, is how good it feels so quickly. So when I was playing football in college, if I took off 2 weeks and then I went and squatted hard, it's like I could, I'd feel it. I would have such a hard time walking, like it would hurt,
Mm-hmm.
After I'd been at BYU for a couple of years, we did a half Ironman, mile swim, 40-mile bike,
Nice.
10-mile hike. And I thought, I'm going to be dead tomorrow. I'm going to do it. And the next day, it's going to take me 2 weeks to recover. And I did it. I woke up the next day and I was like, actually, I feel pretty good. But if I take 2 weeks off and I don't squat and then I go squat, my legs are on fire. Point being, I love how the strength training, you can feel it so quickly. And then the other added benefit to that too is if I'm ever struggling with sleep, if I lift in the day, I'm so much more likely to be tired at night and sleep. Just another benefit of the strength training. Because I feel like some people, it's just, I'm just going to do the cardio. Something Peter Attia said that I loved. Some women are afraid of getting bulky, and so they don't want to lift. And maybe this was on your podcast before, but it was like, do you know how many men try their whole lives to get bulky and never get bulky from lifting weights? Like, you're not going to get that bulky. You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. That's a good point. That's good.
Okay, so what next? What to do?
Let's talk about some prescription here. You want to target all the muscle groups. Within that, you want 10 hard sets of work per session. Prefer compound movements. So think about hip hinge, push, pull, carry. You can work on your technique, watch people at the gym, go to YouTube. And we live in an age where you can just see anything and follow and learn from the best. Another thing you can do is just record yourself and look for asymmetries. You want good balance. Full range of motion. You don't want to be like on a single track. So if you're like a train and you get off the tracks, you're going to break apart. Think about single leg is better than double leg for a couple of reasons. You're going to practice balance. You're going to recruit stabilizers. You're going to work your core. You can actually deliver more force per leg with less spine load. And then a single leg movement is better in a translation in any sport that's like usually single leg bursting. So think about those compound movements, some things to watch out for. You don't have to go to failure. You're going to get almost basically all the benefit if you have, they call it reps in reserve. If you can still do 1 to 2 reps at the end with good form, it's the same benefit, but way less injury risk. Stop if you're losing form. So you're not like swinging your back to get the thing or changing your body, that's where you can get injured, and you're not getting the right stimulus anyways. Because remember, there's a neuromuscular component to this. And stop if you feel pain. Other than just like a muscle burning, just bail out from the set. It's not worth it.
Let me ask a few questions. So when you go to the gym, you're looking for 10 hard sets. So say you're doing a bench press, 3 sets of 10. Does that count as one set? Or are you saying
that's 3 work sets?
Okay.
That's 3 work sets. Yeah.
Okay.
So you're going to do a warm up that takes you 15 minutes to get a good warm up, and then 10 work sets for the day. That's like a minimum rule of thumb.
Okay, that's a minimum. So if you're having a hard day, you may do 20 total sets or 30 total sets.
Yeah. This is just a min. Yeah. I think we'll talk about supersets. The way I work out, I don't even think about sets because we'll get to that. But I sort of blur the lines.
Okay. And then I love this phrase of you don't want to be strong in a single line like a train that can't operate off the tracks. I'm thinking of that as somebody who doesn't do any sort of agility, doesn't do any sort of cardio. Like you're strong as a train as long as you're on a track, but the second you get off, you're completely useless.
Yeah.
And I felt that. So this relates to this stop if you're feeling pain. Growing up, I was so much of the mindset of just push through. And I think coaches taught that. I internalized it. And that's an important concept to appreciate and apply when you're running and it hurts, but you need to push through, or you're achy, but you need to push through. The older I get, especially when it comes to weights, the more I realize if I'm hurting, I got to stop, because it's so easy. If you're doing bench press, I've learned over time that I can kind of like lock my shoulder and, use basically like recruit my shoulders to do more of the bench press. And then you injure your shoulder, right? And worst case for me, not worst case, but worst experience of my life is I was doing deadlift almost 2 years ago and I hurt my back and ultimately ended up in a wheelchair. For 2 weeks, could not stand up, had to crawl everywhere I went, and took me about a year to recover. And so from my perspective, like I lost not only, the pain and the suffering and all of that, but I lost a year of health that I feel like I'm trying to get back. And so I just want to emphasize that point of like injury is to be avoided. That's like one of the primary goals of exercise is none of this matters if we're hurt.
Yeah, it's so asymmetric. Like the benefit that you're going to get by squeezing out 1 or 2 more reps is so infinitesimally small compared to a year's loss of training.
Yep.
So that's why there's a saying in running. You'd rather be 5 to 10% undertrained than 1% overtrained, right? Because once you go across the line, there's a cliff there.
Yeah. Okay. So how do we get started? How do we build up to this?
Yeah. So if you're coming in cold, both actually cold off the street or cold to the gym, I like to start with higher reps. So the way I'm going to talk about this is, but the rep range is dictated by the thing I just said, which is you have 1 to 2 reps in reserve. And so the weight is chosen so that you're getting close to max at the end. 12 to 15 reps initially as a warm up or as you're ramping into working out. I think that's helpful because the weight is relatively less and you're learning the form or you're just warming up. So it's less risk. If you get past 15 reps, you're getting into a place where you're not really building muscle. You're kind of moving, which is fine, but it's not what we would consider hypertrophy range. So then you want to work down to 8 to 12 reps. I think that's a great spot to be. You could live there for years. Once you start going down to 6 or below, you better know what you're doing because that's heavy for you, right? That's where you get into the entry realm, and you better make sure you have good form. You better make sure you have a good spotter. So that's how I think about the reps. I think everyone's heard of progressive overload. I think maybe when people think about that, they think about adding more weight, but you can also get that in other ways. You're just trying to think about adding more volume in a week. So that could be for more weight. You curled with 40s last week and now you're curling with 45s. It could be with more reps. You were doing 9 reps last time in a set. Now you got to 10. You could do more sets. You could go more frequency. You could add another day of working out. So lots of ways. Just think about volume by how much weight you're moving. P times Q, right? It's weight times the reps, and you're increasing that over time. And that's what you need for hypertrophy. Your body needs another stimulus for it to grow.
It's helpful for me because I feel like this happens to me in bench. Okay, I did whatever last week. I did 225 last week. Okay, now I got to get 235. But now I'm risking injury because the weight is jumping up a lot. So I like this of, okay, it's about the weight moved in a week. I don't have to always add more weight.
Yeah.
I can do it more slowly. I can do more sets. Do you pretty much always stay in that 8 to 12 then, no matter what you're doing? And the reason I ask is because especially I come from like the football background where it was like, okay, first 2 weeks, we're going to do 12 to 15 reps, then we're going to get down to 10, then we're going to get down to 6, then we're going to get down to 4, then we're going to do our max rep. And so I'm just used to that cycle of trying to get up to my max rep. I'm staying away from the 1 rep max, but where are you at when it comes to these reps?
Yeah, I think the discussion here is more tailored down the fairway. Again, I'm more in the hybrid camp. And so I'm not trying to go to max for anything. I'm trying to get more muscular endurance than anything because I want to be able to do work over a long period of time. And I also, just for myself, I have a torn rotator cuff. So there's a limit on what I can do there. So that pushes me towards superset. So I think this is an interesting thing that I'm working with here. Superset is you do your 10 or your 12 of something, and then you shift to another body part, and then you go do 10 or 20, 10 or 12 of that thing, and you can string together these supersets, as many as you want. If you go to a CrossFit gym, people are not sitting around, right? It's basically one superset after another thing, right? They call it the WOD, the workout of the day, where they just go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. The trick being, you need to give your muscles time to rebuild the ATP and the glycogen stores in between sets. So why not do an upper body and then a lower body and then an upper body and then a core and then an upper body, then a lower body, then a core, and you keep doing that, right? And then what I like to do then is end that whole series with a couple minutes of cardio. And so, the real gym people will say, well, you're doing interference, and so you're not getting the most out of your strength. And that's absolutely the case. But I don't care. I'm doing this for performance overall, and I'm doing it for longevity. So I'm willing to give up a little bit of raw strength to get the full picture. So do you have any questions about that? I'll program it a little bit, but.
Yeah, no, I like that because the way I've been doing my workouts, especially because I had back problems. So now I'm really trying to focus on my core. And because I prioritize core, I do core first thing right when I get to the gym. But I'm going to mix this in. Like, why not turn this into a superset?
Yeah.
And I love this. Okay, yeah, you're not maximizing strength. One of my favorite sayings that I say basically every day now is there are no solutions, only trade-offs. And so, yes, I'm going to make the trade-off. I'm not going to maximize my strength, the hypertrophy, but I'm trying to optimize for something else. So I like this idea of the superset, mix in the core, mix in the supersets so that I'm not just kind of sitting there all the time.
Yep. Right. I'll just program one specific thing. So you kind of work heavier to lighter. So the first moves are the most explosive or the most heavy. And then as you get more and more fatigued, you can do less. Right. And so you're working to less and less. So, one workout that I love is it's a power clean, but it's a deadlift that you're pulling up into the front of your shoulder down to a front squat. So deadlift, lift it up to your shoulder. Now you squat down with the bar in front of you into a shoulder press. Okay. So that's like a very fatiguing exercise. And so I'll do that at less weight, something I can do 10 to 12 of those, but I'm very fatigued from that. So then I'll go straight from there, drop the bar to pull-ups, and then I'm really fatigued. So then I'll go to a medicine ball, right? And so medicine ball is like a core thing. I'm just doing a wall ball thing, or I'm doing a twist core thing, and really just like burning the end of the match. And then if I can, I'll go do a kettlebell. But you got to be careful with your back after all this because you're quite fatigued. And then I'll go into 2 to 5 minutes of cardio at the end of this. And what you're doing there with that cardio is all this exercise is building up lactate. Your muscles are going crazy. And so what you're doing is you're training your body to clear that lactate that's in your blood and put that in your muscle and use it as a fuel. And the lactate, we'll talk about this more, but the lactate is what's going to limit you and shut you down. And so you're training yourself to be able to work through that. So let's just compare that whole thing that we just went through. And by the way, it doesn't matter what you do. The concept is do an upper body thing, do a lower body thing, or in this case, I did a full body thing. And then I switched, went to pull-ups, or it can be push-ups or whatever, right? It doesn't matter what it is, but it's just upper body, lower body, upper body, lower body, mix a core in, heavier down the line. Okay. And so if I include a rest in there, I'm working for like 7 to 12 minutes or something, right? And then resting a little bit. Let's compare that. Like this. So I love this. I love the person at the gym that they show up and let's say that they're doing 3 sets of bicep curls. Because when people go to the gym, like they want to work their biceps, right? So let's just compare these 2 scenarios side by side. So 3 sets of bicep curls, 3 minutes of rest, right? Because that's what all the textbook is. You want to maximize strength, you got to rest the most, right? The lumbering bear kind of mentality, right? You're just chilling out, sitting there on your phone, waiting for the next set. So in that same amount of time that I just did all that stuff, that person worked about a minute and a half and sat around for about 10 minutes, right? And all that to work a third of the muscle around your arm because the triceps 2/3 of that area. But in total, your bicep is about 1% of your total body muscle. So you've spent a minute and a half, rested for 10 minutes on 1% of your body muscle versus the superset worked for 9 or 10 minutes and worked every muscle in your body. And you got some cardio too. So I would propose, I'll call this the Mickles and Dimes rule. So so the rule is no rest for more than 1 minute until you're exercising at least an hour a day, 6 hours a week. That's the Mickles and Dimes rule. Like you're not allowed to rest at the gym for more than a minute unless you're really up there in the volume in the week.
I like it. And I really appreciate this and that explanation because I have been taught that it's important to rest. But it's important to rest if you're trying to maximize muscle strength. And if we have a different objective, which we're busy, I can't spend 10 minutes to work out 1% of my body. I've got to get more done. I've got to be more efficient. So this gives me license. Okay, just keep moving. It's okay if I'm not maximizing strength. This sounds, I don't know much about CrossFit. I've not done CrossFit. I have a bunch of friends who do it. They look amazing. They look like they're in great health. It seems like most of them end up getting hurt.
They kill off all their client base. That's the problem. It's like a lot of advanced gymnastics that they end up tearing their shoulders.
Okay, so what you were describing with supersets is not CrossFit. CrossFit is another level of supersetting with some advanced motion, and
CrossFit is awesome for the supersets and the intensity. The problem is they have you do a lot of advanced moves with throwing the weight behind you with your shoulder and handstand push-ups and things that compromise and very advanced kind of things that put your shoulder at risk.
And for a 20-year-old who feels invincible, they've got the adrenaline and the testosterone in their body, it can be amazing, but inevitably we all age. And when I hurt my back, I was doing deadlift. I was not doing what I thought was heavy. I used to deadlift a lot. I felt like I had good form. So to me, I was doing a low risk exercise, and I still hurt my back. And so I think just the older you get, you become more attuned to the asymmetry that you talked about, the trying to balance the benefits with the risk, and things that didn't seem quite so risky before become really risky the more you do it or the older you get.
Yep.
Okay. I love the insight you've given me here. You've freed up my brain on a lot of stuff. Big muscles, small muscles. Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, don't forget to do the prehab stuff. It doesn't feel like you're doing anything, but the mobility, the band work, again, you can go on YouTube and get all this stuff pretty easily. But all the supporting muscles, those are all super important. So don't neglect them. And then the other thing is you got to get the right amount of recovery. So without enough volume, your muscles have no reason to grow, but without enough rest and nutrition, they can't grow. So we'll talk about sleep a lot more, but you got to sleep a lot and rest a lot and get lots of protein. There's a crazy fact here that if you go work out, like hammer this in my kids' head about this. Let's say you go work out legs one day and you just isolate legs, but you don't eat enough protein. So what your body's going to do is it's just going to go find your arm and say, hey, there's some protein over there in that muscle. I'm going to break it down because I got to go repair this muscle over here in the leg that I just worked on. So you were literally just cannibalizing from one muscle group to the other.
Interesting. So, gotta eat the protein if we're wanting to increase our strength. When you go to the gym, how often do you personally go to the gym, and how long are you there when you're doing the strength training?
I'll go for an hour or an hour and a half at a time, and that's 2 to 3 times a week. I've been doing more recently because I'm injured, and so I was doing a lot more cardio, and so I'm shifting to do more gym time in lieu of cardio. But yeah, ideally full body, like 2 or 3 times a week.
And one thing that I learned from Peter T is muscle mass is one of the strongest predictors of life expectancy. Of course, there's a lot of correlates with that, a lot of reasons why muscle mass is related to life expectancy. But one way I like to think of it is every time I go to the gym, I'm increasing the odds I'm increasing the odds that I've lengthened my life because I'm either growing or maintaining the muscle that I am bound to lose over time.
Yeah.
So it's like I need to get myself as healthy as I can be today,
Yeah.
because odds are 2 years from now, 3 years from now, I can't be as healthy 3 years from now as I am today, assuming I'm not injured or something like that.
Yeah. I think cardio is fun. It's fun to go fast, but from a longevity perspective, strength is a higher priority. I think people realize that.
Any final things you'd like to share on the strength training?
No, let's go to cardio.
Okay.
Is that good?
Yep. Let's do it.
I love cardio. It's my passion. I have a friend who's a tech founder. He says he gets his best insights when he's running. He has a clear head. You got the endorphins going. I think that's an interesting comment coming from him because he's on the cutting edge of technology, AI, which is both creative and logical. I don't necessarily get it from running as much. I definitely find that getting out into nature, because I run on trails, is very helpful to clear my mind. So I'll do better thinking on the back of that. What I have found actually totally separate is Wim Hof breathing, like deep breathing. I'll find insane insights that just come to me when I'm there. But certainly people find that doing cardio as well. I think cardio gets a bad rap because people think they have to go out and crush themselves on the treadmill, or just I'll just be running out there and people just be, you just hear people breathing really hard. And it's funny. I've got a buddy who ran cross country in college and he's in New York. So it's, you always run into people all the time and people will come and try to keep up with him. And he's like, I could just end this fast. It's so annoying, but they're working so hard. And we've had this conversation. It's, if that's your definition of cardio, then I get it. I wouldn't want to do it either. Yeah. You should definitely be in a flow state when you're doing this.
I've learned that too. And I didn't know how to do cardio until COVID hit. I'd never found anything that worked for me. And I could not, no matter what I did, motivate myself to run on a treadmill. And so for me, it took getting outside, sometimes parking my car somewhere, running away from the car so that I had to run back, and then I could do it. I put in a podcast and I figured out how to do it. And then because of talking to you, you told me about some of the zones, and I realized that what I was doing, even though I didn't feel like I was crushing myself, I was doing it every day. And so it's one of the phrases that I like is the best exercise is the exercise you'll do. I had found something I would do. I was feeling guilty about it because I wasn't doing it quote unquote the right way, but you helped me realize that no, actually maybe what I was doing was like the optimal thing. So anyway, I thought that was all interesting.
Yeah, it takes about 15 to 20 minutes to warm up. So for me, I actually feel better in minute 40 than I do at like minute 10 or 15 by a lot. It's like way better. I think people, they don't get through that first wall because they remember, oh, this is just so terrible. And then the second wall is just developing enough fitness. So it's not just the cost part of the equation. You actually start to get the return on that cost. So what we're doing with cardio in general, you could think about it like maximizing the area of a triangle. So you have a broad base, and that's like the aerobic fitness. That's the low and slow stuff, and a high peak. That's your intervals. A common construct that we like to frame it is in a 5-zone model. Some people talk about a 3-zone model. There's lots of ambiguity because people talk about it differently. Let me just share some insights that can help frame this for people. So I would include a zone 0, which is like all day activity. As you and I are sitting here, our body's mostly burning fat to function, to digest, to do the body functions. Your brain's different. It uses glucose and ketones and some lactate as well, but it doesn't burn fat. With zone 0, the concept is you're taking movement snacks through the day. You're not sitting for long periods of time. We talked about getting up and walking, reducing the area under the curve. Would it be helpful if I define area under the
Yeah.
curve, what that
Yep.
means a little bit? Okay. When you eat food, there's two big sort of destinations for that sugar that you're consuming. That could come in the form of carbs. It could be simple carbs. It could be whatever. It can go right into your muscle and then get fired away if you're actually doing movement. It can get stored if you have enough in your system already, or if you're not moving, it'll get stored as fat, or it'll get stored in your muscles if you've worked out. And so that's why we want you to work out. And so you have a sink for that sugar. So it can get stored in your muscles or your liver. Or if that's already full, then it'll get stored as fat. And that's where that becomes problematic. The way that it does that is two ways. One is insulin is released into the system, and that helps move the glucose. Or there's a mechanical way that you do it. As you're moving, literally your body is able to just push the glucose into your muscle. And so that's the most ideal circumstance because it doesn't take insulin. There's a whole string of problems that happens when you have too much insulin in your system. So when we say the area under the curve for blood sugar, it's literally just time as the x-axis, the amount of sugar in your system as the y-axis, and we're just measuring the spike of how high that is and then how fast that comes down. And if you eat a meal with lots of sugar with not a lot of protein or fiber, that spike's going to be very steep. And if you don't move, that's going to be a long period of time, depending on the factors we just said, if your body, if your muscles need it and so forth. If you eat something more healthy, the spike is going to be low, the duration is going to be low if you're moving. And so that's why we want to reduce that area under the curve.
I've never heard that description, how the body, just by moving, it helps our body move the glucose into the most optimal place for us. So that gives me a really just vivid image in my mind and just helps me appreciate, okay, one, you eat the super sugary food, not very healthy. I now see, or I have a good image, a concrete image of what's happening to that glucose. And so that's a really helpful description.
Yeah, and a long 30-minute walk is helpful for that. That reduces the area under the curve by 30%. Even if you're sitting 10 body weight squats every 45 minutes can be just as effective as a long walk. Part of the reason why is because it's more strenuous to actually get a deep body squat, but also because initially the thing we just talked about, which is your body takes a while to warm up. And so it's inefficient. So it's actually burning more if you're just sporadically moving. So these are all things in the zone zero. Another thing that could be very helpful is a standing desk, or even better is a treadmill under the desk. You think about that 30-minute walk could turn into 3 hours without any lost productivity at work.
This is something I've started doing. I got the standing desk because the physical therapist encouraged me to get one after my back problems. But I've started standing at soccer games. Instead of going to the soccer games and sitting in the uncomfortable camp chair, I just pace or just stand there. And so just a simple thing I feel like is helping a little bit.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's move to zone one. So again, we're in the 5-zone system. Zone one is intense enough to activate the aerobic system. You'll feel a slight shift in your breathing, but it's still easy to talk. It's an effort that you can maintain all day, and it's wide enough to be practical. It's like a 10 to 15 beat range. I'm not going to give percentages because they're very different for every person. The less fit you are, the steeper your sort of curves are going to be about where you trip into the next zone. The more fit, it's going to flatten that zone out. So you have a very, very wide zone one and zone two. And then all the way towards the max, you're going to have a steepening where you get into the higher zones. But the more fit you are, the more work you can do while still having the metabolic systems that are happening that we're going to talk about. So why do we care about zone one? Zone one improves all parts of the curve, including the VO2 max. So when you talk about VO2 max, you can pull it up from the top by doing hard intervals, or you can push it up from the bottom. And the VO2 max in high intensity work will only benefit the VO2 max, high effort stuff. Zone one will improve everything along the curve. That's happening because of the physiological things that are happening inside your body. It's also happening because it's the spot at which your heart reaches the max diastolic expansion. It gets the fullest. And so there's two ways you strengthen your heart. One is on the out, and it fills up with blood. And then the next is when it squeezes. To work on the squeeze part, that's the higher end stuff. That's like pushing really hard. But the relaxation and the zone one effort gets it full. So to improve at this area, you need to do a lot of volume. But what's great about it is you can do so with very limited cost of recovery. Unlike for a very fit person, zone 2 is actually quite hard. When you're just starting, zone 1 and zone 2 are somewhat easy. But for the very trained people, the elite people are running their marathons in zone 2 and zone 3. They're going very fast at these efforts. Eliud Kipchoge, who has the near 2-hour marathon, his metabolic cost for him to run a 7-minute mile is basically similar to the metabolic cost it would take us to walk, probably even less. He basically has no metabolic cost to run a 7-minute mile.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so how do we work this out? Again, lots of volume. 80 to 90% of your workouts should be in zone 1 or zone 2, and the actual time is even less, right? Because we'll talk about prescription, but the workout itself at the higher ends are not all hard, right there. You got to warm up and do the intervals and stuff. So the zone 1 efforts could be brisk walk, it could be weighted or rock, it could be on hills. You can do the run walk technique. And then as you get more fit, you can just run. I think initially when you start running, you're going to just bust right through zone 1. But you can play a sport. I like to joke with my mom, it can't be doubles pickleball though. That's not exercise. That's probably, I put that in zone 0. You're picking stuff up a little bit, but gardening doesn't count. That's zone 0, mom. So go play something, go dance, go jump on the trampoline. You can make it fun. Just move. One of the common mistakes that people make here is they make their slow days too fast. So Jakob Ingebrigtsen has 5 world records in the middle distance. He runs his 5K at 2:34 per kilometer, and he does his easy miles at 4:30 to 5. So like 50 to 60% of what his race pace is. Imagine how fast you could run a mile in and then double that pace. That's the kind of effort that we're talking about. So somebody going out and doing, they can run a 6-minute mile. We're talking about 12-minute miles for this zone 1 effort, right? That's easy, very easy.
And that's where you helped me out, because that's what I was doing, feeling like maybe I was wasting my time. And you're like, no, that can actually be really good. So
Yeah,
that was really helpful for me.
Nice. The other thing you do is you get recovery there. So when you do harder efforts, or if you just have a lot of accumulated volume, you've got to process that stuff. You get toxins in the system. You've got to move through it. And zone 1 is a great recovery tool. It's like almost a shuffle for these people who are leads. Okay, so that's zone 1. Zone 2, so this is the sweet spot. It's the engine of the aerobic system. It's the aerobic base. When we talked about the triangle, it's where the base is. It's an effort that's conversational, but someone would know that you're working. Like, it's getting harder. Again, there's some testing that we can do, and I'll talk about that, but you want to get a feel. You want to be able to dial into your body and really feel, like, when did I feel my heart rate change? When did I feel the deepening of the breath? It's an effort that you can sustain for less fit people, like 1 to 2 hours. Trained people could be 2 to 4, could be up to 10. People doing 100 milers, they're doing that in zone 2. If I were to open someone up and be able to see all the physiological processes that are happening inside, it's a place where things are in steady state. So lactate steady, pH is steady, core temperature steady, respiration steady. It's a sustainable thing that's happening. And that's, I think, part of why it's so magical is as you do more work in this range, you get faster and faster at doing it without having to stretch outside of your physiological steadiness. So this is the max intensity for your body to primarily use fat as the fuel. So it's going to range on fitness, but it's somewhere between 60 and 80% of the ATP that you're using is coming from fat. That is important. It's important because it builds mitochondrial density. The mitochondria have to do the work to get that, to translate that fuel. That improves longevity, it improves disease resistance, and metabolic flexibility means you can switch fuels, right? If you have less sugar stores, this means less fatigue. It's less blood sugar swings, right? It's a more stable metabolic situation. So when you break through zone 2 and you start burning more sugar, you're losing all these benefits of burning fat. There's another thing happening in your system. You're training your body to build this lactate vacuum. So when you work, you build up lactate. It's a byproduct of glycolysis. Glycolysis is glucose burning. So 20 to 40% of the fuel that you're burning here is sugar. That has lactate as a byproduct. Lactate has hydrogen as a byproduct. Hydrogen, once accumulated, will make you stop. It's acidic. It's what you feel when your muscles are burning. It's what will make you stop functioning. Like you have to stop when you have too much lactate in your system. So zone 2 trains your body to build this huge lactate vacuum and scoop it up and use it as a fuel instead of a breakage system. The former coach of Tadej Pogačar, who's the GOAT of cycling, Inigo San Milan, he says 2 hours of zone 2 at a minimum to maintain and 4 hours to build it. I think people, just to give some context, like if you want to be a competitive age grouper, those guys are training 12 to 15 hours a week. Pro athletes, 20 to 30. So yeah, you can do your 4 hours. Stop complaining. And it's anything continuous, right? So it could be running, it could be biking, it could be swimming, it could be rowing, it could be cross-country skiing. You just want it to be continuous. You don't want to have a thing where you're starting and stopping and breaking it up.
Okay, so that was my question. So this still can be the running, the swimming, those basic exercises, just pushing a little harder. Now, you can't say what minute mile that's going to be for everybody because it's going to be different. But instead of the 12-minute mile, maybe it's the 10-minute mile or the 9-minute mile, but not too fast, right? Because we don't want to punch through to zone 3 or zone 4.
Yeah. So let's talk about how to figure out that pace. Again, because it's going to depend on modality, right? It's going to be very different. So the pace is very different, swimming versus rowing versus running on roads versus running on hills versus running on trails. So I would completely ignore pace and focus on the feel ultimately.
Okay.
But there's a few ways we can do this. So I would completely ignore what the calculators say. So there's a bunch of different ways that people say, take your age and minus this number and divide by that. Those are completely useless. It's fine if you want to just do that for fun. And if you feel good when you're doing that, then that's great. But your body is taking into account thousands of different processes that are happening inside of you that ultimately comes out as a feel. So you need to dial in and understand what that feel is. So that's point number 1. But how can you know what you're feeling is what you're supposed to be dialing into? So you need to have some objective measurement. Lactate is a good way to do that. So you can go to a lab, you can buy a lactate monitor, you can come over to my house, I'll test you. But you basically just prick your, lactate circulates in the blood, you test that with a test strip, and then at a given level of effort, let's say wattage on the bike, translates into a given level of heart rate, and that gives a lactate reading. So you're looking for below 2 millimole of lactate as your zone 2 level. Something practical, if you don't want to do all that, is I think a great way to do it is called the heart rate drift test. Let's say you have a treadmill or a flat space, like a track is great because it needs to be really flat. You can't have a hill drift. You need a good heart rate monitor. It does not work to just get your watch. You need an actual strap. The watches are very inaccurate, and this needs to be really precise for this thing. If you want to be serious about cardio, then you need a good heart rate monitor. So chest strap is fine. An arm strap is probably a little better if you're not getting like a squeeze around your chest where you're breathing. Okay, so you have all that gear in place and everything set up. So what you want to do is you go out. Fasted is ideal. Morning's great. You want to have this sort of similar conditions. So you want to be at a time when the temperature doesn't change a lot through the hour. We're trying to maintain as much as we can. I'll show you why. So you go run for 60 minutes. Or if you want to do it on a bike is great. You just do the same wattage. Okay, so you just want to have the same effort, the same pace for 60 minutes. I know I just told you the pace, but we need it for this. So go the same pace for an hour. Okay, whatever pace you think your zone 2 level is, you're going to have to guess, and there's some iteration in this. Or pick watts on the bike, do the same watts for an hour. Okay, you do a good warm up first, and then do an hour, right? So good warm up meaning like 20 minutes. Your aerobic system doesn't turn on for 20 minutes fully. So we get all that data, capture that, and then calculate your heart rate for the first 30 minutes, and then calculate your heart rate for the second 30 minutes. Inside of any of these watches that you get, they have their own system. You can go to Training Peaks, you can go to Strava. I don't know if Strava will actually give you this, but Training Peaks will. Or what you could do is just stop your workout and start another one after 30 minutes, and then you'll just look at your average. It'll give you your average for that workout. So compare those two heart rates. If the second half hour, if the heart rate drifted by more than 5%, let's say 5 to 7% is a good number. If your heart rate drifted between 5 and 7%, that's your zone 2. That's your zone 2 pace, but really more importantly, it's your zone 2 heart rate. Assuming it's not like a super hot day or whatever, right? If your heart rate drifted less than 5%, so if your heart rate for that whole effort was 140, and then your first half was 140, your second half was 142, that's not your zone 2. You got to go more intensity.
Okay.
If your heart rate drifted more than that, like 7%, you got to take it back down because it's too much. Because when you do higher efforts, that second half, your system isn't in steady state, right? There's things that are happening that's creating more effort. And so you'll see that in your heart rate. So I know that was a little specific, but it is important to know this. And I guess if all else fails, it's better to go under than over. That's probably what you should know.
And this is the base of the triangle. This is a place we want to spend hours each week.
Yeah.
To build the mitochondria, which mitochondria, these are the powerhouses of the cell. They're responsible for producing the energy. So this is, okay.
All right, we're good there for zone 2?
Yeah.
Okay. So as we move up, we'll go quickly through the rest of these. Zone 3 and 4, I think, is more relevant if you're training for something. You can probably mostly ignore it otherwise. The shot clock is running at this point. The percentage of fat from fuel is down below 50%. It could be as low as 10%. You can hold this effort between 30 and 60 minutes. Also around zone 4 is what people refer to as the lactate threshold. You should only be able to say like a 3-word sentence. I'm good, coach. You can't talk really. And now your body's producing more lactate than you can use. And so your lactate in your system rises, and it rises like this at first, and then non-linearly, it gets really steep. The way to work this, if you're going to go into this zone, you want to do intervals of, call it like 3 to 6 or 7 minutes, and then back off for a couple minutes, because it's just safer that way. You're training your body to be able to clear the lactate. So before we train the body to build this big vehicle to scoop it up, now we're actually using it to scoop it up, because before we didn't have enough lactate in the system. Now we have too much. So it's teaching your body to actually do that. And then zone 5, I think this is a place that we will spend time. It's where your VO2 max is. I think part of any training prescription should include strides as part of your easy runs. So towards the end of your easy run, do 3 to 5, call it like hill sprints of 30 seconds. You can do these a lot. They're very low risk. Do them towards the end because you're warm, and also it changes the hormone signaling inside. So you kind of break the zone 2 benefits a little bit. So at the end is fine. Lastly on this point, let's talk about interval prescription. So strides you can just throw into any easy workout or hill sprints. Intervals, this is like a separate workout. This is where we talk about 80 to 90% of your workouts should be easy. On the one workout a week that we're doing high intensity, this is the prescription here. You've probably heard coaches talk about 4x4 or 1x3 or 2x2 by whatever. The numbers don't really matter. What you need to focus on is you're targeting, call it 12 to 15, 16 minutes of work at the VO2 max, but you're not going to full max. We're going to go to 90% of max, because you're going to get all the same benefits as long as you pass around that 90% threshold without the risk of killing yourself, and the recovery cost is much lower. And it's better to work up to these. So don't go do VO2 max intervals until you've had 6 months or a year worth of base. It just doesn't matter, and it's too risky. When you start doing it, you build up. So if you want to do 16 minutes of work in this zone, start with a minute all out effort or 90% effort, then a minute of rest, then a minute of effort, then a minute of rest. So you do 16 of these sets with a minute on, minute off. Okay. Then build up to 2 minutes. So you're going to do 8 of these where you go 2 minutes on, 2 minutes off, 2 minutes on, then 3 minutes on, and do 4 or 5 of those. And then ultimately 4x4 is the peak interval prescription. That's when you hear like the Norwegians, what they do is like 4 minutes on. It's very hard to hold an interval for 4 minutes, but it's a very good effort. There's a study that showed people doing intervals. I would not recommend this, but they did 2 of these 4x4s a week for 2 years, and it remodeled 50-year-old people's hearts 20 years younger. Wow. So it is very beneficial.
And this is really training our VO2 max, if I'm correct. And
Yeah.
VO2 max is the number one predictor of lifespan. That is the best predictor we know of that will predict how long we're going to live.
Yeah, I think there's stats that show this. What's not clear, I think there's also the stat that says grip strength is a big predictor of
Right.
like longevity, right? And so like everyone's out there getting those things to squeeze or whatever because that's going to make them live longer. And it's like, no, it's not the grip strength. It's all the stuff that you're yanking on and pulling and lifting that's doing it. So to me, the VO2 max is the end state of you've gone out and done the work and built up all this stuff. And that includes the recovery, that includes the diet, that includes the stuff to be able to go enable you to go do this work, right? And the zone one work too, right? So I just want to caution that yes, that is true, but we don't want to just like the one thing I should focus on is like doing intervals, you know? Yeah. So the other thing I would say about this, irons is an important part of this equation when you start doing the high intensity stuff. So I take an iron supplement, you know, you got to get your blood tested to see if you have too much iron in the system. It is very bad for you. So don't just go take an iron supplement. But people that are fatigued, iron can very much help. It helps with your red blood cells and your hemoglobin. You need that stuff to do hard work. It's especially important for women because of the menstrual cycle. So that's something to look at and work with your doctor on. The other thing to sort of close out this cardio discussion. So after a hard workout, after gym workout, after really any workout, but especially after a hard workout, you want to reset your nervous system. Take a minute or two, don't look at your phone, just sit in your car or wherever it is, breathe and relax, get yourself back to baseline. That's a recovery thing. You don't want to just go from that hard workout, go into a stressful meeting or have a stressful conversation. That's going to make the recovery worse. Track your hours, not your miles. We talked about a good watch and stuff. All these training peaks have really good reporting. It's helpful to track your progress to see what you're doing, how many hours you're doing of what. It's good for reporting. It's good for curiosity. It's good to track things. Fuel the work that you're doing. I think world records are getting smashed right now. It's an embarrassment of riches that we're seeing in the world. And there's a lot of factors to that. A big one is being able to fuel the work. People used to not really even think they'd load up a bunch of spaghetti before they do a marathon and then not eat during the marathon. And now guys are pushing 70 grams an hour up to 150 or even north of that per hour. When you see a person at the end of a marathon where they can't walk, it's not because they're dying. It's because they don't have enough glucose in their system. Their brain is preferentially taking that glucose for itself and just shutting the muscles down. So you got to feel the work. You're going to do better work. You're going to feel better. You're going to recover faster and be able to do the work the next day better. Super shoes, we're seeing several percentage point improvement in times, which is also helping with this world record shattering thing. But also what's helpful for you and I is recovery is so much better with these. My back feels better. My joints feel better. I wear super shoes now on all my workouts. They're a little more expensive, but well worth investment.
And when you say super shoes, I was thinking just like good shoes, but is this like a specific brand called super shoes?
No, yeah, sorry, it's a category. So like it has a carbon plate, so it's spring loaded. So you step and the thing has an energy return and bounces you forward.
So these aren't just like Brooks. These are like...
Most of the brands now have them in them. It's the carbon plated shoe. Okay. There's research that comes out like the next guy has the best one. Right now, Puma had the best one, which is surprising. Nike had the best one forever. It's different for trails. I think that Adidas Ultra Trail is the best trail shoe with the super shoe. But yeah, they continue to evolve that technology and it's quite fast and it's quite fun. My wife has back problems. She'll only wear super shoes now. It feels so much better in her bike just to walk around.
Okay.
Yeah. And then just get out in nature. I love the trails. You get the double benefit of the exercise and the reset. And one little busy parent hack, I feel a little obnoxious. When you're at the park, you can do circuits. You do pull-ups on the pull-up bar. You do push-ups and squats. It's okay. You can be that guy. Consistency is better. Gordo Byrne is this guy. He's online all over the place. I love him. He says, lower the bar until you can do it every day. You said a similar thing. If you can be consistent and not have it be such an overwhelming thing that gets you out the door, just do it so you can get moving. Ritual has this great mantra. He says, mood follows action. So What does that mean? If you're waiting around to feel like getting out the door, it's never going to happen. I don't think the dopamine pathway system is even set up to do that, right? That'd be like saying, laugh first and then I'll tell you the joke. You got to go move. You got to get after it. get outside and go do it. Even if it's get down to the end of the block and tell yourself, I'll turn around if this sucks. Like, just do that and you'll probably start feeling better.
Yeah, and this is something I talk about in social psychology. We know that action leads to motivation. Not always, but action can create motivation. I feel way better at the gym once I'm at the gym, 9 times out of 10, than compared to how I felt before I went to the gym. So I couldn't agree more.
A couple of things I think are helpful for benchmarking. What you can do is pick whatever, 5 or 10 exercises and measure each of those today, and then come check back in after a big training block, or check back in 6 months or a year or something. And it's cool to track your progress. So that could be a mile or a 5K time. It could be the number of push-ups to failure. It could be the number of pull-ups to failure. It could be standing long jump. It could be 8-rep squats, whatever it is. I like having the benchmarks to see if then I'm making progress. One of the things you do on the bike, you can look at your heart rate and say, for a given wattage output, what's my heart rate? And that gives me an indication that I'm able to do more and more watts with less and less effort, or my heart rate demand is lower. The other thing with heart rate, that's a really simple tool, is try to get to a certain, call it like 80% of max. So you're doing some hard interval or something. And then when you stop, look at your heart rate and then count a minute and see how much your heart rate declines over the course of a minute. It's a pretty good tool to see how healthy you are. And you want to see your heart rate recover more and more over time. So if it recovers less than 12 beats, that's at risk. Like, you should talk to your doctor about that. But as you get more and more trained, your heart's going to drop 30 beats in a minute, in that first minute. And the last thing I'd say on exercise is build recovery into the plan. You always want a couple easy days, like 2 easy days after a hard day. And you should always consider all the stressors, like travel, work, kids, being sick. Those are not rest days. Take a full day off every week. Really give yourself a chance to deload. And then think about training in cycles. So you have a full year cycle. Let's say you're building up for a race. Then you want to deload for a month and take 50% of your volume down and just let yourself, reload your hormones, reload your glycogen stores, heal your muscles. And then those cycles can also be on a shorter time frame. So you may break that up into a few month cycles, and you're doing a more strength block, or it could be a more cardio block, whatever that is. And then there's a philosophy, which is kind of funny, that people like to do. They'll do 3 weeks on, and then they'll take the 4th week and do 50% of volume. And the funny backstory is that it was originally started because of people doing steroid cycles. And so it became part of the training logs. But there's definitely no good reason to do it on a 3-week cycle. But you could think about that as maybe it's 5 weeks, maybe it's 4 weeks. Listen to your body and then take a down week to reload.
Because I will say, every once in a while, I do feel really motivated to get to the gym, and it's when I'm really rested, right?
Sure. Yep. And then some recovery tools. So you want to get carbs back in your body after you're doing a lot of volume. So let's say you did a big day on the weekend and you're reloading, you're taking carbs because you're out for 2 hours or something. You want to get carbs in right when you're done too. So there's a window of like 20 to 30 minutes right after you work out. So if you're out on a trail or out somewhere, it's good to plan ahead and have some food for you right when you get back to the car. Protein does not have that same window. As long as you get all your protein through the day, it's fine. So carbs are a big recovery tool. If you undercarb, you're going to pay the price. You won't be able to work out the next day. You'll be fatigued. You won't have the same energy. You won't have the same pop. Sleep is another one. When people are on their taper ahead of a race, you'll often have a coach prescribe an hour extra sleep a night. And then active recovery is on one we talked about. Swimming is actually like a non-obvious one, but I find if you have like a niggle, if you have some back pain, just get off the couch. Don't just sit. Get moving. You want to get that stuff flowing. You want the blood flow to it. Almost every PT will tell you, work right under the pain. Don't just stop. And swimming is great for that because there's no load. You're sideways so the blood can flow. You get a little massage because the water goes by and you get a full range of motion. So that's really great. Sauna, hot tub are great. I would caution on ice bath. I think this is another thing where we talked about fads come and go. You do not want to do an ice bath after you work out. It blunts the There's inflammation and enzymes that signal like stress that say go heal. Ice blunts that and limits that inflammation.
So do you
Yeah.
see benefits in the ice bath, like when you wake up, the Wim Hof stuff, or are you just staying away from ice baths personally?
Personally, I was doing that. I think for mood, it's great. Like I feel great and happy. It's wonderful. I definitely feel like an elation. I don't like it for working out because it does limit some of that stuff. When I'm injured, like I have this foot injury, so I would soak it in the ice bath periodically, but always ahead of a workout, not after.
So
Um,
that's one of the trade-offs then. So for
yeah,
mood, maybe you do it. For muscle recovery, probably not.
yeah. And then you don't want to stay in for more than 3 minutes because you're just vasoconstricting. And so everything shuts down. So whatever benefit you think you're getting, you've got it all by minute 3. So you don't want to, yeah.
Great stuff. I found that I really enjoy listening to health-related podcasts while I'm exercising. So I'm
Yeah.
already I can already see myself at the gym listening to this episode again and again. So let's move on to diet.
Nice. Okay. So diet, you want to support all the other things that we're talking about here with your diet. Focus on single ingredient fresh foods that are minimally processed, give you sustaining energy, build muscle, and support healthy body function.
Okay,
So
I've already
yep,
got something I got to jump in on.
yep,
So two things. We were in Italy last fall. I was teaching a program over there, and I ate a lot of food. It was delicious, and I lost weight. Now, of course, I was moving a lot because we were doing a bunch of sightseeing, but it was a lot of single ingredient foods. And when we got back, I went to the local grocery store, and it was just like overwhelming how much prepackaged processed meals were there. Shocking to me.
yeah,
And the other thing that I've learned over time as I have tried to start focusing on single ingredient fresh foods is how much my taste buds are changing.
yeah,
This blew my mind. Stuff that I used to not like, I just absolutely crave, and stuff that I used to love, like the thought of it makes me sick. So these are two things that I've just have really internalized is one, how much the grocery stores are just full of processed foods,
yeah.
prepackaged meals, and two, how much we can train our taste buds to want to eat healthier foods.
Yeah, it's up to us to stay out of the middle of the grocery store, right?
Yeah.
Just stay on the outside. So a big foundation of this is protein. We talked about this. You want a gram of protein per body weight spread out over 3 to 4 meals. You can't absorb more than, call it 40 to 50 grams at a time. I use protein powder to plug the difference. You can also go with go-to meals like a cup of milk. It could be some yogurt just to get to that threshold. If it doesn't feel hard to get all this in, you're probably not getting enough. It really needs to be a big focus. It's easy to get enough fat and sugar in your body and carbs. Those are very energy dense. Protein, I find I have to really work at it. Another sort of issue with protein is it makes you feel full, right? And so it's harder to get down.
So with the protein, you said you plug with powder. Why not shakes?
Yeah, I think a couple issues with the off the shelf stuff. There's a bunch of ingredients. So I've got this plant based one that's really good, that's got a really clean label, or I'll just get pure whey, no flavoring, no anything. And it's clean how they process it. The stuff in the cans have BPA, the packaging's probably in plastic, there's a lot of additives, it's more expensive. I can just control the variables better.
Okay.
So I think it's pretty obvious why we need a lot of protein: muscle support and repair. It supports metabolism. Protein also runs the body's chemistry. So every enzyme is a protein. Those drive digestion, energy production, DNA repair, and it protects against cognitive decline. So ways to get it: you want lean sources, unprocessed fish, poultry, eggs. You want to avoid sandwich meats and hot dogs and sausages, even those are high in protein. Those have lots of toxins. You can get protein through plants, beans and nuts and seeds, and quinoa are great. Peas actually have a lot of protein. So 2 cups of cooked peas with split pea soup could get you 30 grams of protein. Instead of ice cream, why not some Faya yogurt for $3? You can get 16 ounces, almost 50 grams of protein in that. If you eat half of that plus a cup of blueberries, that's 10% of your daily fiber needs as well. Super healthy, delicious. So you can get creative. You need complete proteins. So 9 of the 20 aminos are essential. Your body can't fabricate them. So you want to get healthy, good, full proteins. Rice and beans are a classic. They're complementary amino acid profiles. And then you need to think about absorbing the protein. So if you take protein in small chunks, your body will absorb it and you'll get all the benefits that your body needs outside of your muscles, but your muscles need to trigger an anabolic threshold in order to trigger muscle protein synthesis. When you're younger, that's 20 to 25 grams at a time. For people that are older, 60 or older, you need 30 to 40 grams at a time to trigger this anabolic threshold. The gating factor here is leucine. So you can add 3 grams of leucine to a smaller meal in order to get that to trigger the synthesis that you need.
So something that I've been struggling with, and this is interesting that you say it should be hard to get that, because when I first learned about protein, this was a few years ago that I really started trying to dial this in. And I was like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to get that much protein. And then what I would do is if we were eating some like barbecue chicken, then I would just make the excuse like, oh, I need a bunch of barbecue chicken. But of course, it had all the sauce and everything. And so when I try to get enough protein, I feel like I end up gaining weight. And right now, I feel like I've identified in my mind what is like a healthy weight for me. And so I'm aiming for that. And so right now, I'm trying to lose weight. And I feel like for the first time in 3 years, I've actually made progress. But I don't think I'm getting as much, I'm certainly not getting as much as I used to. I've got another kidney issue, which we talked about, which is another reason why for me, maybe I shouldn't be maxing out that protein. But you find that you don't gain weight when you get all that protein because you're just getting pure protein and you're not adding on all the carbs on top of it?
Weight is a complicated subject, and we're going to go into it in more depth. But at this extreme sort of far left end, you're losing weight, you're losing muscle, and you're losing fat. There's a sort of healthy middle where you're reconstituting and replacing fat with muscle.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you really want to bulk up, like if let's say you're on an off season and you're trying to bulk up for a position or something, you're going to gain muscle and fat. That's inevitable. And so those will come in cycles. So I think if you can get a DEXA scan and see what the composition is, I think that's an important component to it, because you don't want to lose muscle and all that. You don't want to lose lean muscle. But no, protein is not going to raise your fat levels unless you're eating like extreme levels of protein, which I don't think we're talking about. But protein will get converted into glucose like above 50 grams a meal. But I don't think that's what we're talking about.
Okay. And so do you think much about your weight, or do you mostly just think about overall health and muscle? And
yeah, why don't we go to weight? Because we'll just get into it. So for me personally, I don't, other than to me, I think genetically, I've always struggled with putting weight on. And so I don't have to think about it. I have the other problem is I need to really focus to try to add weight. And when I was doing a lot more cardio volume, I just ran a 100K race and it was really hard to keep weight on. So there's a basic rule, which is the rule of energy balance, calories in, calories out. If you have excess calories, those are going to get stored. If you burn those calories, those got to come from somewhere. I think that's the rule. And then we can talk about the exception. There are important exceptions to this as well. So your weight is largely determined by this energy balance. If you want to lose weight, you need to train for an Ironman, restrict calories, or some combo of those, right? So if you're working out 4 hours a week, you probably do a lot more focus on what you're eating. If you're training 12 to 15 hours a week, you can probably eat whatever you want. And probably you should come from some balance between those.
oh, yeah.
Like GLP-1s, I think, are an interesting case study. So people are losing 10 to 20% of their body weight.
And GLP-1s, we're talking
Ozempic. Yeah. The problem is you feel terrible, right? You don't feel like eating anything. You're nauseous all the time. There's lots of side effects that make you feel terrible. And then you put the weight back on after you stop the treatment. But the biggest mechanism seems to be a reduction in appetite. So people have looked at this, and people typically eat about 500 fewer calories per day. And so when you net that out, that's one of the biggest drivers here of what is happening. So how do we simulate a GLP-1 if we're trying to lose a lot of weight? One effective way to do that is time-restricted feeding, or intermittent fasting is what the way people talk about it. So you could do your feeding window, let's say between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. Maybe you skip breakfast. That's a good way to restrict calories. The problem being that it's hard to get enough protein. You really need to focus on that. I think it's more healthy to skip dinner because you're not digesting food as you're going to bed. Mm-hmm. But socially, that's harder to do because you're eating with your family and you're eating with friends and stuff. But I think for people that have 20 pounds or 30 pounds or 40 pounds to give, I think that's a good starting point and a reasonable way to do it.
Let me just interrupt there too, because I've been struggling with my weight for the last 3 years. It just felt like nothing was working, and partially because I had the whole back injury and kind of derailed. And so I've been experimenting. And for me, skipping breakfast finally, I feel like, was one of the main contributing factors. Like, it's working, but it comes at a cost, and I don't want to do this forever. So
the cost being
losing muscle, probably.
Yeah, right.
And not getting enough protein. Like, I know I'm losing muscle.
Yeah, I think it's malpractice to prescribe a GLP-1 and not prescribe a really hard exercise program. And I would say the same thing about this. You have to do a lot of strength training. You're going to lose some muscle, but you need to push back against that. And yes, prioritize protein. So what is the right way to program this? NIH and CDC guidelines say that a safe place to go is a pound a week. That's depending on your starting point, it might be around 500 calorie deficit. If you get up to double that, that's 2 pounds a week, 1,000 calories. That's kind of the upper end of where they would consider that to be safe. And again, that's energy deficit. So that is eating 500 or 1,000 calories less than we're burning. And so you can get that equation on either side of that. It's probably better to do that as a combo of both food and exercise. And we're also talking about a weekly average, so it doesn't need to be every day. It has to be exactly this. So let's say you want to have fun on the weekend or whatever, like you can make it up for it another place.
And that's a really simple idea, but that helped me quite a bit. It was just like, okay, if I crushed it at night, had some dessert, just skip breakfast and go a little lighter on lunch. And just that mindset actually helped me quite a bit.
Yeah. And as we talked about before, if you have dessert, just go match your carb intake with your effort. So go and walk, go work out, whatever. Don't just let that sit.
Yeah.
So that's at a high level. Let's get to more specifics. So what you're going to do is track your morning weight every day and everything you eat and all your exercise for 10 to 14 days. So you get the apps, the wearables, whatever you need to do to measure all this stuff. If your weight is stable over that course of that period, then that means you're probably like at a steady state. So you can just take what you're eating and just take 20 to 25% of those calories as the deficit target that you're going for. We don't measure what you're exercising as to derive that because you don't know what your resting metabolic rate is. So if you want more precision around that 500 to 1,000, that's what we're trying to get at. And then you review your progress every month. So you do your weigh-in, you take pictures, you do waist measurements. I think it's helpful to see the progress. And then also you want to adjust the deficit. If the weekly loss is more than 2%, that's too fast. That becomes too risky. And if it's less than, call it 0.5%, then that's too slow. So you need to increase the deficit. And then plan some maintenance breaks every 2 to 3 months to get back to energy balance for a week or two. That improves adherence. It makes it easier to do. You improve your glycogen and your hormones. And then again, you want to have a very aggressive strength training to go alongside of this.
What does a maintenance break look like?
So take that 500 calorie deficit and take it back to parity. So 500 more.
So if I'm skipping breakfast for 2 to 3 months, then maybe I put back in breakfast.
Yeah. Or if that routine is working in terms of the timing, then just you can eat a little more through the day or whatever.
Okay.
So I think carbs are tricky, right? Because they're very energy dense, but you don't want to just completely cut out carbs. We just want to match it with the work you're doing. So around 100K a couple months ago, I ate 1,800 grams of carbs during that process. That's the sugar content of 58 donuts or 32 bags of Skittles.
That's insane.
And through the process, I still lost a few pounds.
Wow.
Because you're just burning it so fast, right? So people go on extreme diets and they can't maintain it because if you don't eat carbs, then you're not going to have energy, and you got to feel the work you're doing. When you exercise and you're well fueled, it tells your body to burn, right? If you're depletion training, that tells your body to preserve, and so it reduces your resting metabolic rate. So you don't want to go like run 2 hours, don't eat, don't have any carbs during that exercise. You're going to smash yourself, burn your recovery, hate the process, and that is probably not sustainable. So we talked about energy in, but energy out is like the basic rule. Let's talk about the exceptions. So resting metabolic rate goes up the more muscle you have. That can increase hundreds of calories a day of burning by having muscle, and also with fidgeting. So we talked about zone 0 of just if you're standing, if you're doing squats during the day, even if you're like tapping your toes, all these little things add up, and it also increases the resting rate as well. The thermal effect of food. So protein or high fiber meals can cost 15 to 30% of their own calories just to digest them.
Nice. I just want to go back on the fidgeting. One thing I mentioned, that soccer games now, I just stand. Kids concerts, I stand in the back and just kind of pace. So I'm just kind of looking for them, like take the stairs instead of the escalator. Yep. All these little things, I feel like they're adding up.
They absolutely add up. They add up in the cost of themselves, because when you're starting, you're less efficient, so you burn more, and also your body is just being trained to stay on.
Yeah.
So food quality can make a big difference. Whole foods can generate twice the thermic effect as processed foods. So that could be a 50 calorie difference from the same calorie numbers. And processed food is more palatable. So you'll eat more, it absorbs faster. Fiber, on the other hand, slows down the calorie dump. Food timing matters, right? If you're going to eat a big thing and then go to bed, then it's kind of the opposite of what we just said with moving after a meal. Adding an hour of sleep reduces energy intake by 270 calories from hormonal appetite signals that track sleep debt.
So this is funny to me because it's so easy for me to skip breakfast. It's really hard for me to skip dinner and dessert at night. The other day I woke up at 5 a.m. I had to go for an early drive. I got to bed late, woke up at 5, had terrible sleep. I'd easily eaten 1,000 calories by 10 a.m. and I wanted more, It was so clear to me how the bad sleep totally derailed my diet for the day.
Yep. Yeah, that there's something going on inside of you too. It's not just the time. Like, you're not just bored.
Yeah.
Your gut biome also has signaling effect. It can squeeze out more calories from the same grams of food. Hormones have an impact. And then there's an effect where after a substantial weight loss, actually your resting rate goes down. This like metabolic break pairs with more hunger. As you readjust, there's a pushing back of this process. It's not a one-to-one in terms of, it's not just, eat less, burn more, or whatever. There's lots of stuff going on internally.
Okay, fiber sources. So to get fiber, and this is stuff that it's easy to look up, but like beans, grains, veggies, fruits, nuts, seeds, avocados.
Yep.
Do we want to talk also about some of the, maybe I cut you off, but some of the foods, like how you think about what to eat, what to drink?
Yeah. So you want 40 grams of fiber in a day. I like to do that in a blender. So I throw in a bunch of mixed berries, mixed greens, and then I drink 60 ounces of shake through the day. That's a way to just bomb the fiber. And then you feed your gut. You should definitely pay attention to your gut. 90% of all serotonin is made in the gut. That's the feel-good chemical. It talks to your brain. 70 to 80% of your immune system lives in your gut. It also has metabolic function. So get your 4 servings of fermented food. That's a lot. If you take sauerkraut, that's a very big thing of fermented food.
Yeah.
But it is good for you.
That's your go-to on fermented food then, is like sauerkraut?
Yeah, and you need to get the fresh stuff. You can't get the stuff on the shelf because then it dies. So the stuff out of the fridge. Yeah, and then you want the slow carbs. So sweet potatoes are good, steel-cut oats or quinoa. And glucose is tightly regulated. So you want to minimize the sugar that you have in your body. There's only about 1/3 of teaspoon of sugar circulating in your system. If you get to 1.5 teaspoons, that could be life-threatening.
It's crazy.
So your body is tightly regulating that. One of the best things to do to get rid of sugar in your diet is to eliminate sugary drinks. That's about 1/4 of the way that people consume sugar. and it's the worst kind because it doesn't have any fiber or protein. So a big gulp has 32 teaspoons of sugar. That's 96 times more than your body wants circulating.
Wild.
So you're just like nuking your system. I saw one cool recipe. You just take sparkling water, some lime, pinch of salt, and some honey. Honey's like way more healthy for you as kind of a step forward.
Huh.
Just eliminating sugary drinks completely is a huge win. And then fat gets a bad rap, but you need it for your energy systems. Your cells need it obviously for the cell membranes. They would just be blobs without it. You couldn't hold anything. So nuts are great. Avocados are excellent. Fatty fish, olive oil. Limit trans fats and fried foods, obviously. So waters, you want to drink lots of water. I can't tell you exactly how much, somewhere between 1.5 liters to 2.5 liters. You just got to listen to your body, look at the color of your urine and how you feel. And I would highly recommend a filter for your water. You have chemicals, you have bacteria, you have metals in the pipes. I saw a study that doubles your risk of Parkinson's if you live a mile from the golf course if you're drinking groundwater.
Yeah, I saw that same study. And I just want to interject on the water filter. For so long, I was just of the mindset of like, it's fine. It's tested. They wouldn't be giving us water that's that bad. And I had the same mindset about food at the grocery store. It's not that bad because it's food. And as long as I don't eat too much of it, it's not that bad. Listening to the Good Energy book, I think is it like Casey Maines, nominated as Surgeon General now. I feel like between that book and conversations with you and my wife and other things I've listened to, it's like, no, that processed food at the grocery store, the problem is if you eat it, it will make you eat more. You can't limit it. It's not good for you. Of course, the water could be bad for us or not optimal. And so we finally did get the reverse osmosis filter. And I will say, I love drinking that water. Every morning I wake up, first thing I do is I take a drink of water. Before every meal, I take a big glass of the filtered water. I don't know if it's psychological. Maybe it's partially, but it tastes good to me. I love it. And I feel like it goes back to like, we've got to take control. And part of that taking control is staying away from the middle aisles in the grocery store. And part of that taking control is making sure that the water we drink is clean.
Yeah.
Preaching to the choir here, of course.
Yes,
but
brother.
anyway, this has been a fun realization for me.
Yeah. So I guess wrapping up on that, it's kind of out of scope, but just to quickly touch on it, there's a lot of toxins that are in the water and in our food and in our environments. So, watch out for microplastics. They're sort of everywhere. The rule of thumb I like to have is don't heat up plastic. So don't put plastic in the microwave. That coffee cup, it's lined with plastic. Chicken under a lamp in the plastic bag at the grocery store, that's plastic. Actually, tea bags are terrible offenders. Salt is really bad. So like kosher salt is actually clean. So yeah, watch out for that. And then wash your clothes when you get them. They've got lots of chemicals. So anyways, we could go all day on that, but we'll skip it. But yeah, that's a watch out.
So another thing that we just came across, let's see, we were looking at our barbecue sauce, and the barbecue sauce was like, high fructose corn syrup,
Yeah.
sugar. Barbecue sauce used to be like tomatoes, vinegar, garlic, and it just totally changed. And they changed they changed the barbecue sauce to make it taste like the old sauce, but with cheaper ingredients and more addictive ingredients, right? So it's not like it used to be. And so my wife was at like Sprouts, and the worker was like, oh, check out this Yuka app. You can scan the food. So we downloaded the Yuka app, and now our kids are like, the ranch that we got is the Yuka app rates the food on 0 to 100, right? And so like the ranch we have is literally a 0 out of 100. And so, my son Bennett is always talking about, hey, Dad, I had some 0 food today. But like really simple way to look at the ingredients in anything, any sort of food, and quickly see like, is this made of food ingredients or is it made of corn syrup?
Yeah. That's good. I like that a lot.
Anything else on diet, food? I mean, you said you do a fruit smoothie.
Yeah.
Veggies. You do your veggies in the shake also?
Yeah. I just don't have patience to chew them, and I don't really particularly love them, but I want them in there. Chia is another really good one, high in fiber. It's got some protein. You get the omegas.
Okay. So yeah, anything else on food? Or are we good to move on to sleep?
Yeah, let's go to sleep. So sleep is the free and legal performance enhancer. Consistent sleep will move the needle like nothing else will. It does so immediately. So better health, better focus, productivity, happiness. Nothing works if sleep is off. Stanford basketball asked their players to lay in bed for extra 2 hours. They got 80 minutes extra sleep to 8.5 hours. They saw 9 points of improvement in free throw and 3-point accuracy.
Wow.
I mean, you don't get that. This is observational, right? But still, it's really good. They replicated in a bunch of other venues as well. Losing an hour's sleep due to daylight savings saw 24% more heart attacks on the Monday following. Mayo Clinic put out a study that they found an 18% increase in hospital patient safety incidents due to human errors following daylight savings in the week following. It's really obvious if you're paying attention. The immune system, people are more likely to get a cold, actually 4 times more likely with less than 6 hours of sleep. Risk of heart disease, et cetera, et cetera. So there's lots of stuff to do there. So how do you do it? I like to have a fixed go to bed time and wake time. I don't set an alarm. I just get up when I do, but I go to bed at the same time. And I go to bed obnoxiously early. One hack, Gordo, that I mentioned before, also said this: go to bed at the same time as your kids. You'll have a couple free hours in the morning. You're way more productive in the morning. You can't work or work out at night. It's too much. Do that in the morning. In the morning routine, you want to get sunlight. I have a lamp that's a super bright one that I get. You want to get that light within 30 minutes. I have an app that tells you how much lux you are getting. So you want 100,000 lux in the morning, and there's an app that you just point it up to the clouds and see how much lux that is. That'll tell you how much time you need to be outside or staring at the light. At night, I have a couple hour wind down routine, stop exercising for a couple hours before bed. I ideally stop eating 2 to 3 hours before going to bed. I have the same routine. I do stretching and foam rolling. People like to journal. You turn off the electronics. Blue light blockers help. You want to avoid executive function. You want to stop thinking about work. A cool, dark room that's quiet. So I have an eye mask and earplugs. Robin hates this, but I'll have all the lights in the house dimmed at night. And I love to feel the sun just going down and slowly coming down. And then when I walk in the room and the lights are bright, I'm like, ah! So I find it helpful. Alcohol will destroy lots of things, including your sleep. You can see that in your data. It's really obvious. Try to avoid conflict before going to bed. I always tell Robin, if you got a tough conversation, just save it till tomorrow. I can't talk about it because then I won't be able to fall asleep. And then avoiding naps and stimulants past midday.
So much there. And one thing I've learned about my sleep is for years when I was younger, I could neglect it. I could neglect the good habits because I could still sleep a lot. Now, it didn't mean the quality was as good as it would have been had I been consistent, but I could stay up late and I could sleep in. And the older I get, the more I realize that my sleep can get out of whack real quick if I'm not careful with it. And so I'm trying to keep this pretty dialed in the older I get, because when it gets out of whack, man, it's bad. And we know like depression and anxiety, these things are so linked with bad sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely gets harder to get good quality sleep as you get older. A couple of things that are helpful from a supplement perspective. So magnesium is really good. Ashwagandha helps limit the cortisol response. One thing that I've seen very effective for people is a pharmaceutical called trazodone. It's very effective, and importantly, it preserves the sleep cycles, so you get all the real things. Don't take Ambien. It does not preserve the sleep cycles, and actually your all-cause mortality risk goes up. Matt Walker is a sleep scientist. He says, I can knock you unconscious with a bat, but that's not sleep. that's
so
that's,
good.
that's what Ambien is.
What time do you go to bed?
Am I really going to admit this in the public?
Yeah, yeah.
I try to have lights out, head on pillow by 8:30.
By 8:30. It's so amazing how when you're camping outside, sun goes down, and then you end up somewhere and you're like, wow, it's only 7 o'clock. I feel so tired.
Yeah.
It's just amazing how our circadian rhythm is so disrupted by all the lights in our houses and
Yeah, or like the
society.
power goes out at your house and you're like, wow, this is amazing. Like it's peaceful at night.
Okay, we did it. There was a lot of stuff we could have gone into, but we covered the three main areas of exercise, diet, and sleep. Any final things you'd like to say knowing that this episode is going to be required listening for my children. I'm going to encourage students to listen to it. This is a great podcast on how to be healthy. Any final things you'd like to say as we wrap up?
Yeah, to me, the thing I struggle with is I think when you learn something new, the thing I would challenge you to do is actually use it, right? There's stuff in here that I've learned over time. And I think what makes a difference is, okay, what am I going to actually bring in and do? I think this stuff, it could sound interesting, it could sound boring, whatever, but it will absolutely matter to you. Whether you realize it or not, it will absolutely matter. And with your health, the problem is some of this stuff is reversible, fortunately, and some of it is not. Some of it you wait too long and you can't get some of that back. I would just say, hopefully pay attention.
In psychology, we talk about the knowing-doing gap and how it's so easy to know, it's so much harder to do. Or we talk about common sense is not common practice. This is something I've really been focusing on a lot, especially with this podcast. I learn all these interesting things from people. And so I'm really trying to apply what I learn rather than just learn it and tuck it away for another day or whatever.
Yeah.
So I commit, like I'm going to try to apply these things we talked about. I encourage all the listeners to apply. Again, fierce self-discipline does require fierce self-compassion. We've got to be kind to ourselves. But not doing these things, not taking care of our health is also not being kind to ourselves, because it will hurt us. If we don't take care of ourselves, these things will catch up to us physically, emotionally, psychologically, socially, in every aspect of our life. With that said, thank you so much. I loved it. You crushed it. Another great Bryan Porter episode that is canon for the podcast. So thanks so much, Bryan.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mickles and Dimes with Bryan Porter. I'm so grateful that Bryan took the time to share his decades worth of wisdom with us. And remember, if you want to keep learning from Bryan, visit his website, bryan-porter.com. Recently, I heard a powerful analogy. Our health is like a hang glider. It will eventually descend, but the more effort we put into gaining or sustaining altitude now, through smart, healthy choices, the longer we can keep our glider gliding high, prolonging both the duration and quality of our lives. Bryan has given us some of the clearest, most practical advice for doing just that. I hope we can all apply the things he shared. They're all simple ideas. Please take them seriously.